Hey everyone, and welcome to the Matters podcast. Today we are joined by Damien. I'm very excited for this podcast because I think this is our first guest that has to do with e-commerce, which I'm very excited about. I've actually been looking for a guest in the e-commerce world for a while. So Damien, it's good to have you here.
Thank you very much, Malcolm, and hello to the Chamsel community.
Yeah, man. Thanks for joining us. Excited to jump into some stuff. So before we get into some more of the questions I've been wanting to ask someone in e-commerce for a while, maybe just give us a bit of a background about yourself, and maybe just a background about your business as well.
Okay, so I'm Damien Terblanche. I'm essentially a lawyer by day, and I run Lotus Bookstore by night, which is essentially an online retailer focusing on the reading industry in some sense, where we sell various products including new and used books and bookish merchandise, from book sleeves to mugs to bookmarks in some sense, by various other local brands as well, other than Lotus Bookstore.
Awesome. So when did this all start? Is it because I've had a bit of a look at your online presence, and you're doing really well. So I think that can deceive us sometimes, and we can maybe think that it's been going on for a long time. But just give us a bit of background as to when this started, how it started.
Yeah. So I essentially started blogging about books and doing book reviews back in 2016 when I really found a love for reading. And then a few years passed on, and then in around 2019, I decided to then move over to e-commerce in some sense, where I found that there was a big gap in the market for people who wanted books throughout our country. And that would range from the rural areas to our major cities as well. And what we found was that people don't actually have the time to go to bookstores themselves. And people live their lives day to day, and they go to their jobs. And the weekends are usually filled with life admin. So it was actually nice for me to open up the market where people can spend their nights at least searching for books or searching for reading products, at least in their spare time.
Awesome. So what was that like? What would you say was that moment when you were like, this is something I need to do? Did you have a dream where you were like, oh, like some kind of...
So, yeah, I think I generally had a love for reading, but also to help my community. And I found that the reading community was very welcoming. And I actually attended church one day where they were speaking about finding your purpose and taking the leap in some sense. And I think that's what just motivated me to take the leap in some sense, but also to put your ego aside and to go for it. And I understand that at moments you will face challenges, but I think I just felt like I was ready to actually go for it, and then that was what stood out for me, so I went for it.
That's awesome. And was that, so you saying that you just went for it, but sometimes that can look like a process of a month to a year, like whatever the case might be. What was it for you? Was it quite a transition? Because you say that you're a lawyer by day and this is by night, so was it something that you slowly worked on? Because I know many people, because they don't actually have the extra time, they actually have to transition completely by starting something new, but you've decided to put in the hours after hours, I should say.
Yes.
And so what was that like for you, that kind of going from just having your one job to actually putting in the hours to getting this thing going?
So essentially it took lots of time management, and I had to find myself having to balance my day-to-day job or my daytime job in some sense, and make time for my other passion. And I had to find free time, whether to be after hours or my weekends, where I had to essentially make a choice to choose between what exactly I was going to do and whether I was going to pursue this project. And something that I found was that I spent quite a bit of time watching series and on things that wasn't necessarily fulfilling my soul in some sense. And that time I essentially used for my passion and for reading in some sense, to give back to the community, then essentially put work into my business. So time management, similar to the people who have lectured me in some sense, also advised me where it's important to also use your time sparingly and to use it for your goals.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it was a challenging process at first, but I think we make time for the things that we want and for the things that we want to see grow as well, and to help the community in some sense.
Right. Yeah. No, that's very inspiring, because I think when someone does have a full-time job, you know, the excuses quickly come flying in, like, oh no, I just don't have the time after hours. I've got this responsibility, that responsibility. But if we actually audit our time, we will always find that we've got an hour here and an hour there to actually build the things that we want to get into. So that's really inspiring, and I think you are a living testament that, you know, we can make it happen if we really want it. So then you didn't actually, the bookstore was never physical. It was always e-commerce.
So essentially, we, with our economy in some sense, and the high rates of rental and having to find a safe location as well, I felt that it was best to have an online store. And with the rise in e-commerce and platforms like Shopify, and locally we have Wix as well, and a few other platforms that actually make it easier for people wanting to start their own e-commerce platforms. The rise in those platforms actually made it easier for up-and-coming entrepreneurs and people who wanted to pursue their passions. And I felt like it still required a lot of effort, but I mean that it actually facilitated a lot of the processes. And anyone who has a passion project in some sense can always pursue that. And there are many articles or podcasts out there similar to these, to Jumpstart, where we can learn. And I think you don't necessarily need to have a finished product when you start. And what Lotus Bookstore is now is a testament of years of work and effort. And it might seem like it's in some sense a perfect picture now, but it took quite a bit of effort from myself and the community and my team, and so
a lot of people are of the opinion that because e-commerce is kind of, you know, mostly based online, you can start with very low capital. Very low, like one person can kind of do it in the beginning. Is there any truth to that, or?
There is some truth to that, and I find that many of these platforms offer free plans, and that you do obviously start with less features on many of these platforms. So you'd find that over time you might require more staff accounts or more accessibility to different features. So you can always start at the beginning and start small and then grow it over time when your revenue picks up. And I say when because it will. And given the fact that you wouldn't start something for the sake of starting something, your passion would obviously show through to you and your community. And that over time you'd be able to grow your website as well as your community as well. And with that, it requires more effort than it does capital, but you can definitely start something with a low capital and then grow it from there.
Amazing. So was that something when you started? Did you decide to start like that, or were you like, I'm gonna try and make this thing big from the get and like throw some money at it?
So what you find is that you'd think that you'd love to create the perfect product at the beginning, but what you'll find is that there's many things you don't know.
Right.
And you find your feet as you progress, and you find that you will make mistakes. And I know people start to feel some sort of imposter syndrome when they can't necessarily maintain momentum or consistency, and that then shows you what exactly it is that's possibly lacking with you and your business. And that's then when you need to ensure that you are self-aware in some sense, and that you seek help from your community, whether to be an extra team member or certain features. And I mean, your capital is only one aspect to consider. And you can start with a very low capital and still grow it out to be a major organization. And I mean, all businesses don't necessarily follow the same path as we know Amazon to have had an investment of about $1 billion or $1 million. But we start out small and we grow our businesses from there.
Yeah, that's so cool. And so did you yourself, did you start as one, or did you very quickly get on a staff member or two?
So I had help from my community in some sense and the people in my circles, and I felt that with my people in some sense, but understanding the vision for what I wanted to create was it was received well, and I got support from various people as well. And then about a few months in, I started getting team members and people who were also passionate about what I was passionate about. And you'll find that different people have different skills, and it's great to lean into those skills. And people also have different lives in some sense, and that you'd find that people will accommodate you and your business, whether full-time or part-time, in some sense, to grow your business for you, but also with you. And we love to think that we're the head of this organization and that we are the be-all and end-all, but it's actually your community that grows it for you. Whether it's your customers or your partners or your team members, it's not necessarily one factor only.
I love that. So let's jump into some of the kind of challenges. I want to ask you as well to maybe touch on the more the challenge that's more specific to a South African context, because I think a lot of people say that things are a lot more fluffy or fruitful or kind of easy to get things going in the West. What are some of the challenges with e-commerce specifically, and then with e-commerce, and then more specifically with starting an e-commerce business in South Africa?
So I think with e-commerce in general, a lot of the challenges you'll face is that you'll have to build a community and you have to build a following, whether it's your email marketing or your social media. And there are various social media sites. And you'll find that if you spread yourself too thin, you'll actually give less time and effort to various platforms in some sense. So it's best to find your niche and then to focus on that as well. And you'll see over time what, in some sense, converts better than other platforms. Because there are many marketing avenues for you to promote your business or to grow your business in some sense. But it's important that you stick to what actually works and that you don't do something for the sake of doing something.
Okay. And just in terms of, can I call it the tech side of it? Sorry. Any challenges there that you encountered as you started growing your not only your, I would say, your following, but your business as well, and the revenue and all those things. Any challenges that you encountered there that
Yeah. So one challenge I remember is that you actually have to be tech savvy in some sense and open yourself up to understanding technology, and not just the fact that, you need to get an IT guy to do everything, because you'll find that you also are invested in your business, and that you need to understand why certain things are done and what features you need to add to your site or to your platform in some sense that will ensure that you're offering great value to your customers, but also that it doesn't necessarily it doesn't happen at the detriment to your website or to your e-commerce business. Because I know there are many features and apps and integrations as well that you can add to your website, but they actually slow your website down. And I think something that was similar to, or going back to your previous question, with challenges that we face in South Africa, is that our internet is not necessarily the fastest. So we also need to make provision for the fact that people will access your sites, whether they're on public transport or whether they're in bed at home, and not everyone has access to Wi-Fi in some sense. So you need to ensure that your site is also as fast as possible, so that people don't spend like at least more than 10 seconds or 15 seconds waiting for your site to load. And I find that you need to essentially work on your site in some sense, whether it's your home page or your product page or your collection page, and offer value to your customers. Because when things seem seamless, they will actually, your customers will trust you more, and that you try to also create as little friction as possible between you and the customer, And that's how you build trust over time, and that you actually find that your customers really do trust you. But you also have to be self-aware in some sense, whether it's yourself personally or your website or your social media platforms, and that you need to connect with them in some sense, where you show trust and you show a human element to it, that we're not an organization chasing money in some sense, and that we're offering a service, and that we're fixing problems, whether it's in your community or in your location in some sense, or your market, or generally just whatever problem you are fixing, ensure that you try your best to do it well.
Yeah. I love that point that you made there at the beginning about, that you do need to be a little bit tech savvy. And I think what a lot of people maybe get wrong is that they understand that you need to play to your strengths and let other people play to your, or take over your weaknesses, or fill those gaps. But it is also important to make sure that you have an understanding of every department within your business, so that not so that people can't pull the wool over your eyes. So that when you're outsourcing someone, you have an understanding of what's going on, so that you can still make informed decisions with regard to your business. And so I love that point. Have you had any sort of challenges along the way in that regard, where you did find that, like it's not good that I don't know about this, and you actually did more work in order to become more knowledgeable in a certain part?
Yeah, so a big part in the beginning, I found that as tech savvy as I thought I was, actually running an e-commerce site exposed many of my things that I lacked in some sense, where I then had to take it upon myself to learn some sort of code, like learning code, but also understanding how to take charge of your site, and in some sense also, just to go back on learning code, you need to understand the background and the back end of your site. And you obviously want your website or your platform to present as perfect a picture as possible. But what that also requires the back end to also to work smoothly, and that that you'll see or you'll come across various things that require a bit more learning. So it's just like many things in life, it's an ever-learning process. And whether it's your website, or whether it's your customer management skills, or your time management, or just essentially working on your product, or whether it's a product or a service, you ensure that you provide as best of a service or product as possible.
That's so good. So on that note, maybe tell us about some of the rewards of not just your personal journey in this business, but just in e-commerce in general. I think there was a kind of a peak or a jump in kind of drop shipping, because people started seeing it as like this way to make money quickly. And I've seen I've seen a few people try to go that route and see it's actually a lot more challenging than you think, especially when you wanting to sell internationally, and then you're needing to like deal with like foreign laws and all these kinds of things. What are some of the rewards that you've experienced along the way?
So I think many of the things I've had to embrace as well was creating a community and seeing the love that you'd get from your whether it's your customers or your partners in some sense. And you don't necessarily carry on this journey alone. Whether we like to think that we are this singular organism, we actually also rely quite a bit on partners, whether it be your delivery service or even your website platform in some sense, where you need to be grateful for the fact that these facilities are available, and you need to make the most of them. And you'll find that it is quite rewarding in some sense, and it's not necessarily only a financial gain. And that and just to remember that you are also fixing an issue that was there before you came about into the market.
Wow, that's good.
And knowing that you've tried your best to also solve an issue or solve a problem for your community, I think that's also quite rewarding. Yeah.
That's awesome. And then how have you tackled social media? I see you've got your store has, did we say the name of your store?
I think I've mentioned it.
You mentioned it, okay.
Yeah.
Lotus Bookstore. How did you tackle social media? Because you have a very good following for a bookstore. And if I were to, before I saw your page, or I've seen like a page of a bookstore online, I wouldn't have been able to think as to how to go about to create content for a bookstore in particular. How did you tackle that and achieve the success that you have?
So what you'll find on many of the social media platforms is that there are subgenres for various fields and various interests. And a big part of Instagram is called Bookstagram. So it's a little community where people share the books that they are currently reading, books that they want to read, and books that they've bought but haven't read yet. And I think that's it actually opened up the market for us to actually see what interest is out there. And what we found is that we leaned into the community by learning that our community also needs certain services other than solely having to go into the store. And with that also came people complaining about the prices of new books and in general and not being able to find certain merchandise within the reading community. And then that's when we opened up that field for our community in some sense. And I think it's best to find your niche within every platform that you essentially want to lean into and make use of. So yeah.
Cool. So as we begin to wrap up, what is some advice that you would give to someone wanting to open an e-commerce store? And I want to say more particularly in South Africa, if you want to touch on that specifically. But what advice would you give to someone at this stage, they know what they want to put online and sell online, but they just need that extra nudge? I know you've given us a lot of kind of insight already, but anything else that you want to share?
At the beginning, don't expect it to be rosy. And I feel like it requires a lot of research as well, and to understand your community and to essentially find a problem in some sense in your community and then pursue your time in some sense to fix that problem, whether it be a service or product that you see is missing in the country in some sense or in your community. Try and focus on fixing that problem, where you would get caught up in some sense with a financial gain, but it's best to stay focused on your community and what challenge you are fixing and reducing for your community.
Awesome. And so what's next for yourself and for Lotus Bookstore?
For myself, I am pursuing my legal career further. And with that comes being admitted as an attorney, and I am also starting a new job series soon. But I'm also for Lotus, I'd find that we will take on more team members, and I find that I also have to manage my time more, where I find that there are many skills that are being offered which are not necessarily being used. And so we will grow our team, and we also grow our product service in some sense. We will offer various other products as well within the reading community, but also to focus on our customers and things that they might use to show off their love for reading, or to essentially, let me just explain, to essentially lean in towards their interests in some sense. Yeah.
Damien, it's been so lovely having you on the Matters podcast.
You
where can we find you if you want to get in touch or check out your store online?
So our website is lotus-bookstore.com, and we can also find us on social media. It's Lotus Bookstore ZA, just to bring it back to South Africa. And you can also find us on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook as well. Our LinkedIn account is also focused mainly on business, but if you'd like to connect with us, you can actually focus on Facebook and Instagram.
Once again, Damien, thank you so much for joining us on the Matters podcast, and thanks for helping our listeners potentially take their next step. But that's it for this episode of the Matters podcast. We'll see you in the next one. Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you for having me.